One of the most hotly debated topics in any form of media is the sequel. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Should everything just be standalone? Should everything just be a series? Are things necessarily bad if they're a series? Is the sequel necessarily worse than the original? Is the sequel necessarily better than the original? It's all over the place. Sometimes you'll get a good sequel. Like, I thought Back to the Future 2 was pretty good. Probably not as good as the original. Terminator 2, probably the best sequel of all time. Wrath of Khan, Spider-Man 2, Empire Strikes Back. There's lots of good sequels. Then there's the direct to dumpster sequels, as some people like to call them. Things like The Lion King 1.5, the Beauty and the Beast Christmas special, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 is kind of the other end of the spectrum. I remember back when we used to have video stores. For those of you who are young, you used to be able to go to a store and rent videos. Initially VHS, but eventually DVDs. And I always used to see like Get Smart spin-off or like some Jason Bourne spin-off. It's like every mainstream movie had some shitty direct to dumpster sequel movie that came out, and those are bad. And then you have movies that are kind of in between, like some of the Terminator sequels. Like I kind of felt that way about Terminator Genesis. It wasn't like good or bad. It was just kind of like meh. Matrix Reloaded was not as good as the original, but it was a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of movies that just feel like they were made solely to cash in on the original. And you can see this with series that just don't die. Stuff like Too Fast, Too Furious, Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, Speed 2, Cruise Control. There's a big list of these movies that are like they put some time and money into them, but they're obviously just a cash in on the first film. And then you have Happy Death Day to You, and I was kind of like shocked when I watched this movie. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting like a sequel. I mean, that's what, when a film has a 2 in the title, you expect it to be a sequel. But this wasn't a sequel. It wasn't even a reboot. I guess it was an abortion. It was literally an abortion. It was almost born, and then it died. And I'm sorry if people get offended, but that's the term I use for like media projects that just they just aren't finished, or it was just a bad idea. It didn't go anywhere. It doesn't stand on its own. This is the biggest cash in I've ever seen. And I've watched a lot of movies. We're up to like, what, 200th episode of Reaction Reviews or whatever. This is the single biggest cash in I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how this film got greenlit. I don't know how it got made. I don't know how anyone like sat there and said, this is a good idea. But this is the laziest film I've ever seen. This is like the stuff the Asylum puts out is more creative than this. And it makes me sad because I was like kind of excited for this movie. When I first saw the trailer for Happy Death Day, the first one, I'm like, this looks interesting. It's kind of like a horror movie comedy, kind of like Scream. I liked Scream a lot, so maybe this will be good. And I watched it and I liked it. It had a lot of heart, actually. I thought there was a lot of good chemistry between Tree and Carter. I thought their relationship was really cute. I liked that she kind of became a better person over the course of the movie. There's the humor. I think they did a good job dealing with like the time travel and that kind of thing. I really liked the first movie a lot. Particularly, there's a part near the end where she goes and basically fixes her life and kind of undoes all the bad things that she did earlier on and kind of becomes an adult. So this film is like, okay, people like the first movie, so let's just have the first movie again without any of the stuff that made the first movie good. So let's try to go to the plot. So it starts off with the main character's, Carter's blonde Asian roommate. I don't even know what the hell his name is. Let me just look it up, just so I don't have to keep calling him the blonde Asian roommate. Ryan. So Ryan wakes up. He was out in the car for some reason. I don't know if that's because of Carter and Tree or having sex or whatever. But he comes in, and then he gets killed. He gets stabbed by someone. And after he gets stabbed by someone, he wakes up back in his car. And it's like, now the loop is happening to him. Now Ryan is the new. This film's going to be all about him, because that's when we saw the first movie. We're like, you know, I want to know more about his blonde Asian roommate who's like a bit character with no personality. I think the sequel should be about him. So he's stuck in the time loop now, and then we get one of the shittiest reveals in the history of cinematic reveals. The whole time loop thing was a science project involving quantum mechanics. I would have preferred no explanation. Sometimes it's okay to not have an explanation. There is no need for an explanation. I like the first movie. I would have been perfectly fine if there was no explanation for it. If it was like maybe that, if it was the universe. I mean, you know me, I'm moralistic, so I would have liked it if the universe or God or whoever had cursed her to that state to teach her a lesson, kind of like purgatory, and then she emerges from it a better person. But no, it's this stupid science experiment that the dean wants to shut down because it's using too much electricity. So they fire the machine up because they think by firing it up they'll stop the loop, but it just sends Tree to an alternate universe, and in the alternate universe she wakes up at like she did in the first movie. So basically the first movie didn't happen now because she got sent to an alternate dimension. It's fucking stupid. Like, couldn't we just have a sequel? Could we just have her and Carter's relationship? Maybe have a new villain? I don't know. Maybe have another time loop? Like, do something creative. Don't just put her back into the same thing as the first fucking movie. I feel like they used archival footage for this film. It's so lazy. So, she wakes up, and in this alternate universe, Carter is in a relationship with the head of her sorority. Her mother's still alive. All this stuff is completely different from her universe. And there's kind of this film does have a bit of heart, and kind of one of the things is she talks to her mother a lot, and she kind of wants to stay in this world because her mother's still alive, but she can't be with Carter in this world. And she had actually, and this was one of the more base parts of the first movie, expressed a desire to get married to him and bear him many children, which is woke. But she wants to stay in this world because her mother's still alive, and we kind of have some good scenes with her and her mother, and her mother's just gives her kind of some life advice, and she eventually takes and decides she wants to go back to her world, but there's a killer on the loose. So before she went back in time, Ryan had come back in time to try to kill himself, to try to stop himself from activating the machine that created the time. I don't know, it's just unnecessarily complicated. That's never mentioned again. The loop doesn't happen to anyone else in the rest of the film. It's just at the beginning, like, and then it's just a big lipped alligator moment. It's never going to be mentioned ever again. So then she just starts going through the loop, and because they know it's caused by the quantum computer that Justin Trudeau built, they do equations every day to try to figure out, to troubleshoot what went wrong. And Tree memorizes them and gives it to them in the past so they don't have to do the same work over and over again. So she somehow manages to memorize like 13 or 14 days of complex quantum mechanic equations. I don't know how she does it. She just does somehow. And eventually they figure out, like, so, you know, in the first movie, her roommate killed her by loosening the restraints on the killer and feeding her a cupcake, a poison cupcake. So in this movie, her roommate's not evil. The evil guy is the doctor that she was having an affair with in the first movie. But in this movie, it's her roommate who's having an affair with him. I don't know. Nothing about this movie makes any kind of sense. So, like, basically we go through what we saw in the previous movie. We have a montage of her killing herself again, which is kind of fun, but it's just kind of like, could we please have something a bit different? And then, like, she has to keep going through the hospital thing until she can get it right, and she kills Toombs, and she kills the doctor, and she kills his wife, and saves her roommate, and then she goes back to her timeline. And you're kind of, like, left going, what was the point of all of this? Why was this movie even made? Did it advance the story? No. Did it advance the characters? No. It reset the character development from the first movie. Like all of Tree's character development had already happened. We didn't need it to happen again. And this is my issue with a lot of things. This is why I hated the Iron Man movies. Because in every single movie, Tony Stark would go through the same character arc. He'd stop being an asshole, become a better person, and then that would just vanish in the next movie. And then he'd just go through the same character arc over and over. And that's also something that happened in Sailor Moon with Sabrina, is her character would reset at the end of each season. And it was insufferable, and it was really obnoxious. But that's just kind of the way that these people decided to make it. And it's like, okay, none of the other characters matter to the main universe because it's an alternate universe. Going to this universe didn't resolve anything. All this movie did was provide a lame answer to the main question. No, to questions no one wanted answered, and delivered nothing. It was like watching a void for an hour and a half. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, is it a bad movie? I don't know. It's the first movie, but worse. Like, how do you define a bad movie? Doesn't it have to be a movie to be a bad movie? This isn't even a movie. This is like extra footage they had from the first film that they redubbed, and they're like, oh yeah, it's the sequel movie. Like, because you could very easily like redub this movie to just have it be the same plot as the first film. Like, this is the single laziest sequel I've ever seen. So don't watch this movie. If you kind of like the concept, go watch the first movie. The first movie was good. I really liked Happy Death Day. This is the biggest cash-in rip-off I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, that's review, and God bless.